welcome back to another video. Now, today's video, guys, we're going to be doing another DbD discussion video, which I have not done in several months, but after watching, a couple of Dead by Daylight related videos and seeing some talk about the perk self-care and stuff like that, I figured it was an okay time to talk about the perk just for a filler DbD discussion video, because I really was unsure of what I am going to be doing for the next video, so I just decided to do this. And now I already kind of have an idea of what I'm going to be doing for the next video, which I'll discuss at the ending of the video. I just want to do the discussion right now, and then I'll leave the announcements for at the ending of the video. So, anyway, I thought it was the right time to talk about self-care, because now currently we are in the state of the game for Dead by Daylight, at least for the survivor side, is the meta is bring as many fast healing survivor perks as you can. And that is all centered around the new perk Boon Circle of Healing, which is still relatively new. A lot of people are really enjoying the new Boon perks and stuff like that. Or just doing blessing totems in the first place. And Boon Circle of Healing, because, number one, Boon perks are still relatively new. Booning is still relatively new. And Circle of Healing, also was one of the very first Boon perks to come out. A lot of survivors are currently using, Boon Circle of Healing, and sometimes using it alone, sometimes using it with a bunch of other healing perks to heal as fast and efficiently as possible in the game, and that is kind of the current survivor meta. And I kind of do like this. It has definitely shifted the meta quite a bit. It isn't really very annoying for the killer side. I like that the meta has shifted. The meta has never shifted this drastically for a while. I don't think since... The meta really hasn't shifted this drastically since when Blight came out and Undying came out, and killers were using hex perks just very aggressively. So I really do like that the meta has seen a current shift now, and that's why I thought it was a good idea to talk about self-care, which is a healing perk. And I think it has kind of been forgotten about, surprisingly. I thought people were going to be absolutely crapping on this perk now that Boon Circle of Healing has came out. But I think because people have already crapped on this perk so much, they've completely forgotten about it. So if you were to mention self-care within this meta of Boon Circle of Healing and using all these really fast healing perks, people would probably give you a dirty look and just of disgust and shame for even mentioning such a horrible perk as people describe. And this is where my discussion is going to come in. Why do I think that self-care is a decent perk? So those of you who don't know, self-care has been crapped on quite a lot. Self-care has gone through a lot of changes since it first was released in 2016 at the very beginning of the game. It used to be one of the most powerful perks in the game, and then it got changed and it was still a pretty powerful perk, and then it got heavily nerfed, and it's been left at the same state for a long time now. Over the years, it has just slowly been forgotten. When I started playing DbD a few years ago, I did see people use self-care quite a bit in their builds, and thus, being a new survivor, I thought, well, maybe I should use self-care as well. And once I got a hold of self-care and I was able to use it, it started to really die out once new healing perks and stuff like that came out that just completely outclassed self-care. And over those years, self-care has been completely crapped on, and I'm here to tell you why I don't think self-care is a very bad perk. I think self-care is actually a decent perk, even amongst this massive healing meta. So right now, I would say it's probably not the smartest idea to use self-care. Your teammates might hate you for it. So I would probably wait until the meta shifts again to start using this perk again, but by all means, if you don't care about it like I do, use self-care, and I'm here to tell you why I think self-care is a decent perk. Self-care can be actually pretty useful in a lot of situations. Here's where self-care gets like a lot of crap on. The most common annoyance with self-care is a survivor is healing on their own, and the other survivor is being really, really altruistic, and they want to heal the survivor, but they completely ignore them, and they keep self-caring themselves. In certain situations, this isn't a terrible idea. If you're in comms, I think it even more enhances how good self-care can actually be. If a survivor is doing a generator and you are in comms with somebody, you can tell them, okay, I have self-care. Continue doing the generator. I will self-care right in front of the generator. And once I get done self-caring, I will hop onto the generator for you. This can be very efficient. You have one survivor doing a generator, and you have another survivor who is healing with self-care. And although I have not done the math on if this is actually more efficient, if the survivor does self-care and the other survivor goes on the generator, or if the survivor gets off the generator for 16 seconds, heals the survivor, and then they both go onto the generator, I have actually not done the math to see which one would be more efficient. So if you have done that, please tell me. But even if it was the case that the math would show that actually it would be more efficient for a survivor to just heal them quickly and then they get back onto the generator, I still don't think it's bad to self-care in some situations if you have things like botany knowledge or you have a medkit to heal yourself. Obviously, self-care will give you a little bit more efficiency in your medkit, and if you're running self-care with something like resilience or botany knowledge, if you have resilience, you can 99 yourself, and if you have botany knowledge, you can heal a little bit quicker. Obviously, if the survivor has like a really fast medkit or something, it's just better to get the heal over with so that you don't endanger yourself. But if you're playing in solo queue and you see somebody self-caring on their own, especially if it's in a corner, but if it's by a generator, just in any instance, realistically, just leave them alone. You're going to waste more time trying to convince them to stop self-caring than you are just sitting there and just waiting. When are you going to stop self-caring so I can get my altruism points and I can heal you? Just leave them alone. Let them do their thing. Get on a generator. I think for the most part, haven't done the math, guys. Sorry about that. But I think for the most part, it's probably just a smarter idea to go on a generator. And in comms, like I mentioned, self-care can actually be a pretty powerful perk. So if you've ever watched tournament games, and I would like to talk this specifically in tournament games, but this applies to just regular Swift games where you're playing in public matches. But in tournament games, when you're playing in private matches, if you've ever watched a tournament game, you know that a lot of tournament games, the survivors completely prioritize doing generators. Obviously, they have to heal at some points, but what you will rarely see in tournament games is a survivor cleanse a totem or open a chest or, do any sort of side objective. Even amongst this, like, boon meta, you won't really see, and I've watched a recent tournament that has been done recently amongst this boon meta. A lot of the perks that were used were not boon perks. And the reason for that is because in tournament games, the survivors want to play as efficiently as possible. They do not want to waste their time doing any side objectives whatsoever. They prioritize generators. You will rarely, almost never, see them cleanse a totem or do a chest, especially do a chest. But if the killer has a hex perk, sometimes they will ignore it, but if it really gets on their nerves, rarely they will cleanse the totem or bless the totem if they have a boon perk. You will rarely see that. And it leads me to the question, why is self-care not more commonly used in tournament games? I'm not an expert on the game. I haven't been playing the game as long as some people who are in sweaty tournaments have been. But I think self-care can actually be pretty good in tournament games. And the reason why I say this is because in tournament games, usually how it will play out, like I said, they prioritize generators the most. Usually how it will play out is the survivors will split up and they will each do a generator. And when a survivor is interrupted by the killer, all the other survivors, they'll communicate with each other, make sure everybody else is still doing a generator while that person is being potentially interrupted. So if two survivors are being interrupted, they'll usually, again, try to split up, and then the person who's not being interrupted will go right back onto a generator. And self-care opens up another window, but instead of with generators, it opens up a window for healing. And what I mean by that is in tournament games, most of the time they will still heal if they have time to do so or whatever. And the thing about self-care that I really like is that now it opens that new window where, okay, I can have two survivors working on a generator, each on their own. So you have, like, let's say you're playing on Shelter Woods. You have one survivor working on the left side of the map. You have another survivor working on the right side of the map. You have one survivor being chased. And then the other survivor has self-care and they're injured. And maybe they're in a bit of a tough situation. Maybe they have been hooked twice, and everybody else is kind of in a better situation. Maybe one other person has been hooked once, and the others haven't been hooked at all. That now opens a window for that person to heal on their own relatively quickly, while allowing the other two survivors to still do their generators, and they can still play as efficiently as possible in these tournament situations. That's where I think self-care can actually stand out pretty nicely. And some of you are saying, well, why don't you just use inner strength, or, why don't you just use Boon Circle of Healing or whatever? In some scenarios, self-care can still be better because the amount of time that you waste blessing or cleansing the totem and then going into the locker can be the equivalent of just starting up a self-care and going until that timer ends. And the nice thing about self-care is you can use it at any time. There are no requirements other than obviously being injured. You can do it mid-chase. You can combine it with other perks that tie really nicely with it. And now self-care actually looks a little bit slightly better compared to other perks. The main one being inner strength, because now cleansing totems is kind of frowned upon in this boon meta. So self-care actually does look a little bit better against inner strength now, considering cleansing totems is now frowned upon. So yeah, self-care can be like it can do a lot of things in a lot of different areas, and that's what I really, really like about it. The other healing perks are just kind of useful in like one scenario, but self-care does a little bit in almost every slot, making it still come out as a decent perk. So you might say, well, why is self-care so crapped upon then? If you've listed all these things, why does the community not understand these things? I think it has to, and I'll tell you why. The community misinterprets self-care for being a bad perk, when in actuality, the problem with self-care is the people that use self-care. Much like Urban Evasion, or Spine Chill, the survivors who use it are the problem, not the perk itself. I'm not hating amongst, like people who use self-care improperly or whatever. I'm just saying that is why self-care is frowned upon. They're misinterpreting people misusing the perk for the perk just being bad. If you are a good survivor and you know how to use self-care efficiently, self-care can be a pretty good perk. The problem is a lot of people who use self-care do not how to use it properly, and thus it makes it look like a bad perk. Typically, the people who use self-care because it is very unpopular are Claudettes that just started the game and they don't really know what any perk does, so they just throw on self-care and then they use it, and they start healing themselves and they don't let the other teammate heal them or whatever. They don't make smart decisions with self-care because they don't even really understand what the perk does or how the perk compares to other perks. So yeah, I think this perk is just frowned upon simply because the community misinterprets a bad perk for just people misusing the perk in general. So I think self-care is a decent perk for the reasons that I listed. And I would actually suggest a small buff to self-care. And that small buff would be changing it back, because I believe at some point, if I stand correctly, self-care made you heal at 75% the normal speed. And if I'm not wrong, so survivors heal on their own if you just have a regular med kit at 16 seconds. So I believe 75% of the normal speed would be 28 seconds, which is only a 4-second difference from what self-care currently does. That would make this perk a little bit better, put it more in the middle in terms of time efficiency to compare better with other perks, and I don't think it would make it overpowered by any means necessary. So I think the small buff of changing it back to 75% would not be a bad idea. I'm not sure why they changed it to 50%. Maybe it was because 75% was still a little bit too extreme. But now with all these healing perks that are used in this game, I don't think a 75% difference would be bad. Hopefully I did the math correctly, but I believe a 75% 75% of your healing would be 28 seconds to heal with self-care, if I stand correctly. So I only propose one change to this perk, but if it doesn't happen, I still think that self-care is a decent perk, and the community simply misinterprets self-care as being a bad perk, even though it's just people who use it because it's really unpopular are new survivors who do not know what the perk does. Just like if a new survivor was using a perk like, I don't know, Slippery Meat or something because it's a base game perk. Obviously, Slippery Meat is a bad perk, and the only survivors who use it are survivors who just don't understand the perk. And self-care, it's unfortunate for self-care because it's in a very unfortunate position with the healing meta, the fact that it is unpopular, the fact that the survivors who use it are terrible at the game. It's just in a very unfortunate system, or in a situation, and that's why it is largely frowned upon, even though I think if you're a good survivor, this perk can be really good, especially in communications, as I discussed. So, yeah, that's all I have to say about self-care. Tell me your thoughts in the comment section down below. I would like to see. And if you have any additional info that I question, especially with the time efficiency and everything like that, please tell me in the comment section. I would like to hear that, just so that there can be a little bit more discussion, a little bit more knowingness about certain stuff that can definitely help the whole self-care, is it good or bad argument. So, other than that, make sure you stay tuned for the future content. My next planned video will be another Dead by Daylight video, and I was thinking about doing suggested changes for any perk that I think needs a change in the game. So obviously this doesn't apply to all perks, but any perk that I think needs a change in the game, no matter how big or small, I will discuss in the video. And obviously I'll make a list of all the perks that I think need a change, cut out, any time in between. So it's probably going to be over an hour-long video, most likely. So it's probably going to be the equivalent to one of my tier lists or something like that. So yeah, that's all I have to say in this video. Make sure you stay tuned for that future content. Read the community posts so that you can stay up to date, and join the Discord. Link will always be in the description of every video. Other than that, like and subscribe, guys, and I'll see you next time.